The haunting of Detroit's abandoned factory? It was an unusually cold December night in Detroit, and the streets, once bustling with life, were now eerily quiet. The city had fallen into disrepair, with rusted cars lining the sidewalks, and the once thriving industrial district now a ghost town of decaying buildings and long-abandoned factories. For three friends, Alex, Chris, and Ryan, it was just another night of adventure. And they had heard the stories of the old factory on the outskirts of town, a place whispered about in hushed tones by locals, a place of dark legends and vanished souls. No one in their right mind would dare venture there after dark, but to them, the fear only made it more enticing. "Are you sure about this?" Chris asked, his breath visible in the freezing air as they stood outside the factory's rusted gates. He tugged at the collar of his jacket, glancing around nervously. "Oh, come on, man," Ryan said, grinning, his flashlight cutting through the darkness. "It's just an old building. There's nothing to be afraid of. Right? About people disappearing in this place? It's not just some old factory, guys. There's something off about it. But we're here now. We came to see what's inside." The others nodded reluctantly. The thrill of uncovering the truth was stronger than any fear, and despite the warnings, the three friends couldn't resist. "All right, let's stick together," Alex said, his voice low but filled with excitement. "We go in, get some photos, and get out. Simple as that." They entered through a side door, which groaned as it opened. The air inside was thick with dust, and the smell of mildew and decay hung in the air. The beam of Ryan's flashlight flickered in the darkness as they moved further into the building. The factory was a maze of narrow hallways, massive industrial machines long abandoned, and empty rooms that once hummed with activity but now stood silent and lifeless. The group moved through the building, each step echoing in the emptiness. They could hear the distant sound of something, perhaps the wind, creaking through the walls. "So where do we start?" Chris asked, looking around nervously. "Let's check out the main floor first," Alex suggested. "We'll work our way down to the lower levels. I heard some weird stuff happens down there." The friends cautiously made their way to a large open room, once filled with rows of machines. Now it was just a cavernous void of rust and broken glass. The walls were marked with strange symbols scratched into the surface, as if someone, or something, had tried to communicate. Alex pointed to one of the symbols on the wall. "That's strange. I've never seen anything like that before." Ryan squinted at it. "It looks like some sort of ritualistic mark. You think people used to do stuff here?" "I wouldn't be surprised," Alex said, his voice trailing off as he ran his fingers over the symbol. "But we should keep moving." They made their way deeper into the factory, following a narrow corridor that led down into the sub-basement. The further they descended, the more oppressive the air became. It felt like the walls were closing in on them, and every step seemed to carry them further from the world they knew. The sound of their footsteps was the only noise in the otherwise oppressive silence. Suddenly Ryan froze, his flashlight beam caught on something strange. "Guys, look at this." There, on the floor, was a collection of what appeared to be old, yellowed photographs scattered in a pile. Some were torn, others smeared with something dark. As Alex bent down to pick them up, he noticed something unsettling. The faces in the photographs were distorted, as though they had been deliberately scratched out, but in the corner of each image, one detail remained, the same strange symbol that was on the walls. "What the hell is this?" Chris muttered, his voice shaky. "I don't know, but it's starting to feel like we're not alone here," Alex said, his heart pounding in his chest. As if on cue, a strange noise echoed from somewhere deeper within the factory. A loud bang followed by a series of scraping sounds, like metal dragging across the concrete floor. The three friends exchanged uneasy glances. But as they turned to leave, the air grew cold. A whisper, soft at first, slithered through the air. It was barely audible, like a voice on the wind. Then it grew louder. It was a chant, an eerie rhythmic chant in a language none of them recognized. The temperature dropped even further, and a strange pressure seemed to settle on their chests. "Do you hear that?" Chris whispered, his eyes wide with terror. Before anyone could respond, a low growl echoed from the darkness. The friends spun around, but there was nothing there. Just the endless expanse of shadows and crumbling walls. "Okay, that's it, we're leaving," Alex said, panic creeping into his voice. "Now!" They rushed toward the stairs, but as they made their way back up, the temperature plummeted even further. A cold gust of wind blew through the factory, extinguishing their flashlights. They fumbled in the dark, trying to get the lights back on, but the air around them grew thick, suffocating. Then, a scream. A high-pitched, otherworldly scream filled the factory, making their blood run cold. It came from behind them, somewhere deep within the basement. The scream was followed by a sound of something dragging itself across the floor. "Run!" Ryan yelled, his voice breaking. He bolted toward the stairs with Alex and Chris hot on his heels. They burst into the main hall, but as they made their way to the exit, the doors slammed shut with a deafening crash. Panic set in as they tried to open the doors, but they were locked, as though someone was preventing them from leaving. From the shadows, a figure stepped forward. At first, it was just a silhouette, but as it emerged into the dim light, they could see it clearly. A tall, gaunt figure with hollow eyes, its face twisted in an expression of agony. It was covered in tattered clothing, its skin pale and sickly, as if it had been dead for years. It moved with unnatural speed, its limbs jerking and twitching. "No, please," Chris gasped, backing away. The figure reached out a hand, its fingers long and spindly, grabbing hold of Ryan's arm. The room seemed to spin, and a deep voice, low and guttural, whispered from the creature's mouth. "You shouldn't have come here." The figure reached out a hand, its fingers long and spindly, grabbing hold of Ryan's arm. The room seemed to spin, and a deep voice, low and guttural, whispered from the creature's mouth. "You shouldn't have come here." When the sun rose the next morning, the factory stood silent, its crumbling walls untouched. The friends' disappearance would become yet another mystery, another story to be whispered about in the streets of Detroit. But the factory, with its dark past and its hungry secrets, remained, waiting for the next group of explorers foolish enough to venture inside.